Yeah, so Clint thinks he's so high and mighty. He's made 3 videos consistently in a row, and now he's already whipped out the Todd McFarlane shirtless debating Peter David video again. Already, that's all it took. Actually, I think this is important, and I've got a theory, but I've got to lay this out first because I don't want anyone to misunderstand this. Okay, if somebody is criticizing the status quo, you could say one, that's only because they're looking for attention. Okay, especially in comics, that happens, sure. Or maybe it's because you're clinging on to the status quo so tightly that you're missing out what's happening right behind your back. That's also possible. And in the case of this debate with Todd McFarlane and Peter David, it wasn't like Todd McFarlane was just looking for attention, though. Like I think a lot of professionals in comics that reach a certain level, massive ego, like massive ego. I've never met the pure number of people with ego anywhere else outside of comics. It is sometimes staggering. Todd McFarlane, Peter David, obviously I don't know either of them personally, but this debate showed a young Todd McFarlane, trying to, yes, get attention, but he had actually he'd earned every ounce of it at this point that he had. And now obviously he's an industry legend, but I mean, but what about comics? Okay. So here's my point. Here's why I bring this up. Actually, hold on 1 minute. Before I tell you what my point is, check out the Alterna Comics Fall 2022 pre-orders campaign, and specifically this book right here. It'll only cost you $1.98 to pick up Downcast #7. This is the last Downcast book you're gonna be able to get from Alterna Comics in a long time, and the goal is to hit 300 of these books pre-ordered, not total sales, but pre-ordered here on the campaign. If you want to see me continue to publish with Alterna, let's show Alterna that we care about these books. So thank you very much. That will absolutely help. All right. So who was right in this debate? It didn't matter. Who cares? It was Peter David. His complaint was all they care about is money. Basically, I mean, there's more to it than that. I met Peter David in person. He's actually a really sweet guy. So I got no problems with Peter David. Todd McFarlane, I'd love to meet Todd McFarlane. That'd be amazing. I just haven't. But his argument was, so what? You can make money and do creative, awesome things. Like it's not just about making money. Spawn is something. He's transcended what superhero comics are. Something like that. So the reason I bring this up is because right now we're in an interesting age in comics, and that things are changing. And yeah, I came back making videos more consistently about this just in time because things are changing. I was noticing, and I have noticed over time, that my kids will be reading books, and I go over and I say, "What's that?" And I look at it, and oh my goodness, it's actually a graphic novel. They're reading comics in front of me, even though the book just looks like any regular old novel, that they might be reading from anything else, but they're actually comics. My daughter was reading this, Wings of Fire, the graphic novel. Apparently it's a novel series, but they also made a graphic novel of it. And she was reading this, New York Times bestseller for, take that for what it's worth. This is only book 1. There's going to be more in this particular, graphic novel series. But here she is reading comics. I had no clue. And when you look at this, like down here, it has 6,121 reviews. The book is $7.99. I don't know if you can see that over my head. It's a very inexpensive graphic novel, and it has a ton of people reading it for that many reviews. You can fake reviews, I guess, to some extent if you like weaponize bots to do so, but it's very unlikely. I mean, this is a Scholastic book. It just doesn't happen nearly as much with books that you've heard of, and they try to, especially Amazon's tried to like tamp down on that kind of stuff. But my point is, kids are actually reading comic books. Okay. And yes, they're reading Dogman, they're reading Captain Underpants still. I mean that's still popular. They're reading all sorts of things. You could even make the argument like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that kind of stuff. They're novels with pictures in it and words, and this is what kids are actually reading now. So what happens is that once these kids get older, if they still like that medium, if they still want to read, comics in that form, they're going to have no nostalgia whatsoever for what we now think is the mainstream comic book industry, the size and shape of books, the fact that they come out in single issues, all of that kind of stuff. The vast majority, I think, of comic book readers that are just casually reading comics, I'm going to get into that too, they have no nostalgia for what we think of now as comic books. So here's the thing. You could say, well, that's just lame. We need to bring them back to, comic books as they exist now. That's fantastic. But they're not kids' comics made that way very often, relatively speaking to what Scholastic has been putting out. They don't have as wide of distribution. I mean, they're in comic shops, for crying out loud. Yes, they're in bookstores and things, but it's actually very limited that those kinds of books are getting directly to kids. It's a fact. It just is. This kind of stuff, it just has the right kind of reach and the right kind of distribution, and it's working better than anything that mainstream comics is doing for kids. 10, 15 years, things are going to look very different only because this generation will grow up, and who knows what their tastes will be, but they'll be very different. So casual comic book readers. Now, I like to think that I write comics for people that like comics, like they're into comics. But I saw this and it was interesting, and I can't help but think about it. You don't have to be into comics to read comics. And it goes on to tell a story about the stigma that you get from being a comic book reader. Funny side note about that is, I obviously am into comics. I also, I like Magic the Gathering, and I will play it and get into it from time to time, more or less. But when I'm with my comic book friends and we say anything about Magic, that I play Magic, they'll say, "Oh, you nerd, you dork, there's a stigma." And then it works the other way around. When I'm with friends playing Magic and I talk about comic books, they say, "Ah, you're a nerd." It's just really funny because the stigma is such an outside looking in kind of thing, even though we all know comics are awesome. Who cares about a stigma, and does it really still exist, really? But the point is that actually normal, not the people that are casual, I would say, into reading comic books, I think are actually a pretty important part of the market. And if you can reach outside and get to those people, like with this Wings of Fire book, if you can reach out and make a book that's accessible at that level, it's gonna be successful. Why would I say that? Because if you're looking at strictly American comic books, the most successful graphic novels do exactly that, and they are for kids. I mean, those are the big players. That's just a fact. I mean, you're going to have the best of Marvel or DC that are out there, and especially reprints. It's just not the same thing. So it fills all over the place, but I actually had a rhyme or reason to all of this. So having said that, when we get back to the issue of shadow bans on Indiegogo, or frankly any other platform, if it makes it so hard to sell comics, at some point you have to say, hey, this is not working. What is possibly going to replace this? And my fear is that crowdfunding in and of itself is just not structured well to last a long time, because it's so dependent on these companies, these tech companies, that it's basically a whole bunch of very small, agreements. So for example, if I launch one book on a crowdfunding platform, if they kick off my book, it's just one book. It's not a big deal. Now, if you're a major publisher and you have a deal with Penguin, or Random House or whatever. Like if you have distribution and you are getting into stores with the volume of all of your books, it is much more difficult to cancel something like that because it's become part of the system. So there is something to be said for that. I do not believe that the current comic book industry as it is right now makes a lot of sense. But what's happening, I think, and that many of us are missing, is that comics, yes, are going to survive as a medium, but they have basically bypassed the entire system and they've moved into more of a normal book market. Those are where the big sellers are. Even when you look at manga, it's the same thing. You're going to be able to get the same kind of books in the same places, lower price point, thicker. They look like novels. Is this really the difference? I don't know, but I tend to think so, that there's something there. So full circle here. Where's the Todd father at? Oh, there we go. Now you can disagree. I'm just throwing an idea out there, and I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. I'm still going to be using crowdfunding until it no longer makes financial sense to do so. Currently, right now, I think it makes sense. However, it has and will still make more sense to also consider other options for distribution and relying on something more permanent. I'm not talking about any other crowdfunding platform. I'm just talking about distribution in general, getting out to the public. So you could fight that, or you could explore the options. I don't know what the correct answer is, but I tend to believe that it's a good idea to look at the new up and comers and ask yourself, why is it that they're being successful where everyone else, the diehards, are failing? What is changing here? And again, you're not going to find those young up and comers in Marvel or DC. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the book publishing industry. They're finding a way to make it work. Sales numbers back that up. I'm not just making this up. And also manga are doing the same thing. Very interesting. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the Alterna Comics Fall Pre-Order campaign. Here's my debate now with the t-shirt idea. I'm doing this t-shirt. I could either sit on the t-shirt until Downcast 4 launches, it's going to be next year. Or I could do maybe even a website exclusive to test that out instead of a crowdfunded campaign, and just make it a website exclusive so you get a t-shirt. I'm looking at a beanie as well. You could back those. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Appreciate you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow in another video.